Intervention. It is something that has happened or will happen to you many times in your life. Think about way back in first grade. You're playing with your best friend and all of a sudden she steals the doll you wanted. She took your limited edition Maria Barbie doll that you got for Christmas. She starts playing with it and she's bending her arms and it's looking weird and she keeps bending it and pop. Your Barbie's arm breaks. There's that moment of silence and then all hell breaks loose. You start fighting, you're yelling at your friend, she's yelling at you, your mom sprints into the room. She intervenes, separates the two of you, and dissolves the situation. But there's still something wrong. You no longer have that Maria Barbie doll from Christmas. You're still mad, and you never let your best friend back into your house again. Now, I want you all to imagine that same scenario, but on a global scale. The coveted Barbie doll becomes influences or resources, and the first grade girls and their mom become countries, and tensions are high. This is interventionism. What is that, you may ask? Well, the official definition is a government policy or practice of doing things to directly influence a country's economy or the political affairs of another country. And I'm one to typically trust official things, but this isn't necessarily the whole truth. In reality, interventionism can have positive effects on a country's economy or political affairs, yet long-term can have negative effects. Look at the Ukraine-Russia situation, and I'm sure you've all heard of it by now, but if not, here's a bit of background. This is a conflict that has been occurring since 2014, with tensions consistently rising between the two nations. The United States quickly stepped in with assistance to Ukraine in 2022 and is currently loaning over $29.8 billion in weapons and equipment to keep Russian forces from overtaking the land. Yet the president of Ukraine keeps asking the United States to continue sending support and more of it. There have been numerous compromises that have been demanded in order to make any policy change regarding the state of this war, and the fact that there are not and have not been many changes in the state of it causes some people and historians to think forever war. This was a term coined during the time period of the Cold War and lays out a concept of a lasting state of war with no clear outlooks that would lead to its end. Usually these wars are situations of ongoing tension that may escalate at any moment. So, based on these speculations and fears, we have our billion-dollar question, so to speak. Should the United States get involved? And to be honest, there is no right answer to this question, as different people and even different countries will have various opinions, answers, and facts about why the United States should go in one direction or the other. These forever wars have been pits of money that are debatably wasted just for the United States to pull out of them after spending so long funding them. Yet the consistency of these types of wars throughout United States history have helped to boost our economy short-term, yet long-term have disastrous effects like the loss of jobs or drops in demand for manufactured products. United States interventionism isn't a new concept, though, and some of our past conflicts could show the future of the United States if they choose to stay with Ukraine. So could this be our new forever war? In 1914, the nation was introduced to its first major conflict, the First World War. And this is a big one. I mean, it is a world war. Everybody is involved to some extent. The United States even joined in and was the leading exporter of supplies to the Allied powers, with things such as clothes, food, weapons, machinery exiting the country at fast rates. The United States avoided physical intervention for some time, yet entered into the war in 1917 at its very end. And this action led to the Allied powers of Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and Japan toppling the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire in mid-1918. The United States emerged from this conflict as an up-and-coming power with the money, alliances, and resources to potentially turn into a major global power. And the government used this knowledge to push themselves to the front of negotiations. From this, the United States gained allies as well as trade deals. Yet they lost out on what could have been one of the most important coalitions of the time, the League of Nations. This was an organization designed by President Woodrow Wilson, and it was grounded in the maintenance of peace across all nations of the world. After the war, Wilson took his ideas to Congress and the world, where they caught on quickly with other nations. Yet, Congress decided it would be in the United States' best interest to stay out of the global spotlight, and they refused to sign the petition to enter into the League of Nations. Despite this, the United States was economically booming during the time period after the war. There were imports, exports, more alliances, but it all seemed too good to be true, and that's when tragedy struck. The numerous frenzied deposits of money and then their subsequent withdrawal due to projected falls in stock led the United States to fall into a state of economic despair, now known as the Great Depression. During this time, the value of money plummeted, making it virtually worthless, along with whatever economic benefits were gained during the immediate aftermath of World War I. Everything became extremely expensive, unemployment rose to 25%, and manufacturing and trade basically stopped. This incentivized the nation's entrance into World War II, where yet again they were the leading exporter of supplies to the Allied powers. In 1941, the United States entered into the war due to an attack by Japan, where then the war continued on for 3 more years. And in 1945, Germany and Japan surrendered, effectively ending the war. Yet again, the United States rose to the front of negotiations, and at this time, the nation was beginning to be considered a global superpower, and they truly had the components to maintain this status for a long time. So the big 3 nations of the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union held another conference to discuss another global organization, the successor to the League of Nations. The result of this conference was the United Nations, and it was a platform for the maintenance of peace worldwide through a coalition of global nations. The United States and the Soviet Union used this platform to battle ideologically, and these battles caused rifts within the United Nations debate platforms. So I want you all to imagine last year's class president election. Candidate 1 promises to fix the hypothetical problem of the boys' bathrooms in Perkins by locking the doors and making sure no one can go in to ruin them, while candidate 2 promises to implement ways to keep these bathrooms clean and open. Each tries to convince you that their way of fixing the bathrooms is the right way, and it's hard because they use 2 totally different methods to solve the exact same issue. Now, later on, you hear your classmates arguing that they think candidate 1 is better than candidate 2, and vice versa because of the ways they choose to solve the issue of the bathrooms. It then turns into a conflict throughout the whole upper school where people are arguing over things completely unmentioned by the candidates, but that they think is significant enough to change the other's opinion. All the while, the candidates sit back, relax, and watch as people argue over their ideas without actually being a part of this conflict themselves. Think of this as proxy wars. Now, the official definition of a proxy war is a war instigated by a major power which does not itself become involved. In the context of the Cold War, these were ideologically based battles between democracy and communism. They were fought between 2 regions or nations indirectly, such as the Vietnam War. This was a war fought between North and South Vietnam with intervention/backing from the United States and Soviet Union, respectively. These nations poured countless sums of money supplying their own puppet nation and consequently affected the political and economic affairs of Vietnam. This is inevitably similar to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. The United States is pouring money into a conflict that may or may not have a clear end, just for the reasoning of protecting ideas they want to maintain globally. Yet the United States did not want to just protect their ideas, they wanted to protect resources. In 1990, Operation Desert Storm occurred, and this was a mission run by the United States through a coalition of global allies to eject Iraqi forces, who were there for oil, from Kuwait. People will dispute the United States' right to intervene and dissolve this situation, while on one hand they were a part of the United Nations, so the mission was essentially grounded in the maintenance of peace. Yet, on the other hand, the protection of the United States was seen as a cover for getting what they wanted: oil. And here's where interventionism becomes an issue. Take the phrase, no pain, no gain, but modify it a bit. Some pain, some gain. There's monetary loss from putting that much energy and funding into an endeavor, especially if the outcome isn't one that is desired. Going back to the Ukraine-Russia situation, it is still a some pain, some gain situation. There is the monetary loss there is the gross loans or total money that the United States has donated as our pain, and then the gain of stopping Russian forces from overtaking Ukrainian land. If the United States were to further intervene, like being physically present with forces in Ukraine, it would spark the beginning of a much larger conflict, potentially even a World War III situation. Yet, if they were to take a further step back, the Ukraine would fall to Russia, being the end of the country's independence, and the United States would lose the money they have donated. So there are many consequences, as you can tell, leaning either way into this notion of interventionism or conversely non-interventionism. And don't get me wrong, I am not here today to give you a concrete answer on this subject. Yet, when our nation gets involved in the global stage, I implore you to weigh the pros and cons of our past and current involvements into making your own decisions for yourself. There's so many people right now in this room who could be our future leaders, have influence in these global policy decisions, or even be voting for these future leaders, and I want to be sure you all have the tools to be knowledgeable and make these decisions in an educated way to create positive impacts upon our nation and the world. We must find a happy medium for the best price of protecting the future of the United States.